You're listening to Processing, brought to you by Machines in Between.
Form. Formless. Form. Formless. Because philosophy is the imposition of form on the formless. On the formless. And this is the mark of a philosophical mind. This is the mark of a philosophical mind. Philosophy is to do with getting hold of a problem and holding on to it relentlessly and doggedly. Relentlessly and doggedly. And this is the mark of a philosophical mind. You stick to your problem. You stick to your problem. Because philosophy is the imposition of form. The imposition of form. On the formless.
So, you're a philosopher?
Yes. I'm Joshua Habgood-Coote from the University of Leeds. Technology companies seem to be invested in making imaginary worlds real. In 2021, Facebook rebranded itself as Meta, promising to deliver a virtual reality world. They called this world the Metaverse, borrowing a term from Neil Stephenson's novel Snow Crash. Their infamous legless product demonstration drew comparisons to the dystopian fiction Ready Player One, which prominently features virtual reality technology. Similarly, Elon Musk has justified his interest in space colonization with a long-termist philosophy, which he claims to have found in Isaac Asimov's Foundation series and Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In 2023, his company X started trialling a chatbot named Grok, which is modelled on The Hitchhiker's Guide. Now, there are two ways to react to technologists revealing that their work as adults is motivated by their teenage reading habits. One is to dismiss it as childish epiphenomenal marketing fluff. A capitalist is trying to exploit workers and consumers, no matter which books they read in their childhood bedroom. A second response to technologists' invocation of science fiction has been to argue that they've misunderstood the fiction. Lots of media coverage of Meta's product demonstration for the metaverse insisted that Facebook had misread novels like Snow Crash and Ready Player One, thinking of them as utopian, whereas in actuality they are biting dystopian novels. Technology bosses want to persuade us that certain pieces of technology are good for us, both as individuals and as a society. Their strategy is to locate their products in supposedly utopian science fictional worlds, as a way to persuade us that these products will help make those worlds real. The counter-strategy is to contend that the technology should instead be situated in dystopian fictions, the idea being that the technologies will make these dystopias more likely. When Apple released its Vision Pro headset, Jack Dorsey, the former CEO of Twitter, deployed the dystopia strategy in a particularly clear way. In an interview he said, quote, "If you want to understand the future of any technology, just read science fiction. They're actually the roadmap writers." Technologists and their critics seem to be trading utopias for dystopias. The shared idea is that if there's a science fiction utopia that involves a technology, then that technology is good. And if there's a science fiction dystopia that involves a technology, then that technology is bad. Plausibly, this game has been started, or at least perfected, by critics of technology. Over the last 30 years, the fictional representations of technology have been overwhelmingly dystopian. Think about Terminator, Black Mirror, and The Matrix. Now, I want to argue that the game of trading utopias for dystopias has some pretty serious problems. The first problem is that lots of forms of technology feature in both utopias and dystopias. Think about automated systems that can meet people's basic needs for food, shelter, and tools. The Federation in Star Trek is a utopian post-scarcity society, which relies on full automation to enable planetary exploration. Thumbs up. By contrast, in the Expanse series, full automation has led to a kind of social stagnation on Earth, which has robbed the majority of people's lives of any meaning. Thumbs down. Is one story more realistic or more important than the other? Or is the value of automation just more complicated than a simple thumbs up or thumbs down, based on a dystopian or utopian fiction? The second problem is that fiction is different to prediction. Science fiction writers aren't roadmap writers, in Dorsey's phrase. Or at least they aren't in virtue of being science fiction writers. They might moonlight as technologists who determine the future in virtue of creating the technologies, as Neil Stephenson seems to have done. Like all fictions, science fiction is suppositional. It starts with a set of what-if questions, and then unfolds both a world and a story based on those suppositions. Now, these suppositions might be realistic or not, and different authors are going to draw on different bodies of knowledge to fill in the world on the basis of those suppositions. Golden Age science fiction draws on engineering knowledge, and more recent science fiction draws on ecology and ethology. If things are going well, then a science fiction narrative can give us interesting information about what the world would be like under certain conditions, given certain other things we know. This kind of suppositional knowledge is just different in kind to prediction of the future. One concerns what would happen if certain other things were true, and the other concerns what will happen. The third problem is that science fiction writers are often asking the wrong questions. There's a stream of semi-predictive science fiction which starts with what-if questions about technology. What if we had close to light travel? What if we could build positronic brains? What if we had replicators? The supposition starts with the supposed technology, and then builds a society up on the basis of that technology. Now, this is fine as an imaginative exercise, but it's deeply implausible that the form a society takes, in particular whether it's a good or a bad society, is entirely determined by the technology which it uses. Some technologies have politics, sure, but the politics emerge through the interactions between social practices and the form of a technology. Technology isn't destiny, and pretending that it is obscures our collective political choices about how and whether to use technologies. The final problem is that the game of dystopias focuses our attention in the wrong places if we want to evaluate the technology we actually have at present. There are lots of ways to find out whether technological systems, as deployed in the real world, are good or bad. You can go ask people who make, repair and use them. You can go to science and technology studies scholars. You can ask about the climate impacts of technologies. Focusing on whether technology is more plausibly written into a dystopian or a utopian narrative distracts us from the easy ways we can gain knowledge about the problems and the benefits of technological systems. Think about the recent discourse about chatbots which are driven by large language models. As technology companies encourage us to pontificate about whether a world of automated writing is liberatory or constrains the human spirit, those same companies are stealing artists' work and using colossal amounts of water to cool server farms. We don't have to look to possible worlds to think about whether technology is good or bad. We shouldn't get pulled into the game of dystopias, or confuse science fiction with futurology. Does this mean that we ought to follow Plato in rejecting the genre of science fiction as mere shadows on the cave wall, stories stories that we tell to scare ourselves? Well, not necessarily. It is pleasurable and worthwhile to explore imaginative worlds for their own sake. And entering imaginative worlds allows us to imagine that things might be otherwise than they are now. And finally, science fiction can allow us to explore suppositions which are motivated by pretty esoteric bodies of knowledge. What if spiders became super intelligent? What if people could control geological motion with their minds? What if we changed ourselves to explore new worlds? Reading science fiction can help us to understand these esoteric bodies of knowledge. We shouldn't think that science fiction writers are trying to predict the future, and in fact thinking this distorts the real value of the genre.
Trying to predict the future is a discouraging and hazardous occupation. If by some miracle a prophet could describe the future exactly as it was going to take place, his predictions would sound so absurd, so far-fetched, that everybody would laugh him to scorn. However, the most intelligent inhabitants of that future world won't be men or monkeys. They'll be machines, the remote descendants of today's computers. Now, the present-day electronic brains are complete morons, but this will not be true in another generation. They will start to think, and eventually they will completely outthink their makers. Is this depressing? I don't see why it should be. I think we should regard it as a privilege to be stepping stones to higher things. And yet even greater changes are still to come, because the future is not merely an extension of the present with bigger and better machines and cities and gadgets. It will be fundamentally different, and many of the things we take for granted will one day pass away as completely as spinning wheels and sedan chairs and oil lamps. And that is why the future is so endlessly fascinating. And that is why the future is so endlessly fascinating. And that is why the future is so endlessly fascinating. Because try as we can, we'll never outguess it.
This has been Processing, a Philosophy Mixtape. To sum up our discussion, philosophy is to be studied, not for the sake of any definite answers to its questions, since no definite answers can, as a rule, be known to be true, but rather for the sake of the questions themselves, because these questions enlarge our conception of what is possible, enrich our intellectual imagination, and diminish the dogmatic assurance which closes the mind against speculation. But above all, because, through the greatness of the universe which philosophy contemplates, the mind also is rendered great, and becomes capable of that union with the universe which constitutes its highest good.
Think about it. 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 Think about it.
In the processing system proper, we have input and output devices, an internal control section, a memory section, and an arithmetic and logic section. The control, memory, and arithmetic and logic sections together comprise what is called the central processing unit.
Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it.
Send 109.
Think about it.
Add 101.
Think about it.
Store 114.
Think about it.
Write 114.
Think about it.
The result of the processing then leaves the memory through an output device.
Think about it. Think about it.
Let's just keep that in mind.
Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. About it.